99.1, the sports animal. Let's bring in friend of the show from ESPN, college football analyst, sideline reporter, recruiting expert, and all around great guy, Mr. Tom Luginbill. Doodle Dad. I can't leave out Doodle Dad. Tom Luginbill, how are you?
A triple doodle dad.
Three.
Triple
wow.
Doodle dad. Three. Two adult, two standard, and then one little mini. And I got to be honest with you, this is the first time we've embarked on the mini.
Okay.
And going forward, as dogs always continue to cross that rainbow bridge, we might go mini full time. This little one we got to a firecracker.
That's what I have. I only have one. Daphne is a mini golden doodle.
Well, how old is she? Wait, how much does she weigh though? Because she looks bigger than a mini.
28 pounds.
All right, yeah. So ours is 29.
Yeah. It just perfect for home, apartment,
no doubt.
Craziness. Yeah.
Great car rides, all of it.
Yes. Awesome. So, all right, we got the important stuff out of the way, Tom.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Tennessee season 10-2. Obviously, the disappointment with the South Carolina game, which shocked a lot of us. They gave up 6-3, and South Carolina did that. Of course, they backed it up with the win over Clemson afterwards, did the Gamecocks. But how do you reflect on the season for Josh Heupel in year 2 at Tennessee?
That the strides they made were so significant that I think it's going to really help them get over the hump when it comes to dealing with some of the negativity that may be still swirling around the NCAA investigation. You know, how do you get past and beyond that? Well, you win, and you win fast, and you win ahead of schedule. And all of a sudden that stuff starts to fade into the background, and it's not as prominent. People have a harder time using it against you, particularly in recruiting circles. So I just thought I remember, and I think I said this to you before, last year we had the week 2 contest versus Pitt. And I remember with our crew, we were at practice on Thursday, and we were having dinner that night. We were having a discussion about Tennessee, and we were like, you know what? Their roster is more talented than people think it is. Like, the players on this team, and maybe not at every spot, and not certainly what they want it to be ultimately, but a lot better than people gave it credit for. And then, if you recall, in that game, Joe Milton was ineffective. They pulled Joe. Hendon Hooker comes in, and the rest is history. All right, they kind of start to take off. But I just think that the strides that they've made on both sides of the ball, the fact that they do have better players means that they got a better core nucleus to build upon, so that it's easier to sustain and not take a dip, right? You know, because you can have that flash in the pan moment. That's what you want to avoid. But I think they've got enough of a foundation. And, you know, you referenced the South Carolina game, and I think you can go to almost every weekend of the college football season and find a team somewhere that lost a game because they didn't focus, they didn't prepare based off of the outcome of the previous week's game of the opponent they were playing against. Do you remember the game South Carolina played before that game?
Yeah.
38-6 to Florida, who then the next week loses to Vanderbilt, right? And listen, we're dealing with 18 to 22-year-old kids, and coaches will tell you this. You're sitting in the meeting room, right? And you're sitting in your position staff room, and you've got your whole position group in there, and you're turning on the film, and you're studying, you're going over things. Those kids aren't dumb. They're watching the film too. They're looking at it, and they're going, these guys aren't very good. You know, we're going to just show up. We'll play better than these guys. And that's the challenge as a coach, psychologically and mentally and emotionally, of getting kids to understand that you can't just show up. And that's hard to do with 18 to 22-year-old kids. That's different with a 28-year-old 6-year pro, right? And I think that we saw that all throughout the landscape of college football, almost every week this year. And that's the pitfall of dealing with young people. So listen, was it a bad loss? Yes. Okay. But I think it's not exclusive to them. It just happened to be late in the season where an injury was suffered to a player that was a Heisman Trophy candidate in Hendon Hooker. And it just happened to unravel that way. And unfortunately, it is what it is. And at the end of the day, all of this discussion, Vince, that we were having about, okay, well, who should get in? Who should be the 4th team? At the end of the day, here, it's very simple. Don't lose twice. You can't lose twice. You can lose once. You can be undefeated. But until the College Football Playoff Committee proves that they will put a 2-loss team in, you can't lose twice. It's that simple. It doesn't matter if the loss is bad or if the loss is by 3 points. You lose twice, you're out.
Well, don't you think it should be more about wins than losses? But I guess to your point, they're not showing that that's the direction they want to go, because they have pointed to the losses more.
Yeah, and again, a one-loss team in Ohio State that did not play in their conference championship game versus two-loss teams that did not play in their conference championship game. This scenario laid out perfectly for the committee to make the choice that was the least controversial.
Right.
And at the end of the day, that's what they love to do. They don't want to have to answer any tough questions. They don't want to have to answer the debate. They want it to lay out for them so it's comfortable, it's easy, and then as we saw unfold with seeding, and I know I'm holding up my air quotes here, they're not supposed to create matchups.
Right.
But if somebody would have told Bill Hancock and the committee that, hey, during the course of this college football playoff, there is going to come a moment where you are going to have an opportunity to have Ohio State and Michigan play for a national championship. Are you telling me that committee wouldn't set that up for potential? Of course they would. Of course they would, and that's why the seedings fell where they fell.
Well, Blue Corrigan says they didn't think about a matchup with Ohio State and Michigan.
So. Of course not. No, of course not.
Now, if it was the SEC, then they'd pair them up in the semifinals, so they would avoid an all-SEC championship. Seen that before.
Unless it was, let's just say, Auburn and Alabama. Same scenario as the Michigan and Ohio State. They're not going to want that in the semifinal. They're going to want to hopefully set that up to have an Iron Bowl national championship game. Do you understand what that means financially? And the same thing goes for an Ohio State-Michigan rematch.
Visiting with Tom Luginbill from ESPN. So what do you think about the playoffs? Is this the Georgia Invitational? Do you like the favorites? What do you think about the two semifinal games?
Well, first off, I think that we are continuing to devalue and underestimate TCU. Mm-hmm. And not just them as a team, but the caliber of player that they have on their team. I don't think people realize how good their players are. Now, this matchup with Michigan is intriguing to me because Michigan is not a boat race, get in a track meet style of offense. And that's good for TCU. The downside for TCU is the overall depth top to bottom of Michigan's roster could create some issues down the stretch, late in the third, throughout the fourth quarter, where they could just eventually wear down TCU. But this is where people, I think, have got to give a lot more respect to TCU. They've been riding the lightning all season long, man. All they know is one possession games, winning on the road, finding ways. They've really had, one real major blowout, and it was, the Iowa State game late? Yeah. It's like, what do they do? They don't know what to do in a blowout. I mean, they're sitting there waiting. Well, wait a minute. Hold on a second. We've got the ball with 37 seconds left. We got to get down the field, and then we got to get our field goal team, run on there, kick a field goal. That's all they know, right? They live in that world. And a lot of teams haven't experienced the in-game scenarios that they have experienced almost on a weekly basis. So I think Michigan has their hands full more than people think. Max Duggan's a special player. Kendre Miller, a special player. By the way, both of those guys, first team, all Big 12. The two corners at TCU, all right? Those two guys, both of them, first team, all Big 12, have locked down opponents. They locked down – listen, Texas has some receivers now. They shut down the Texas passing game. So I think that I just think that it's going to be a much better game. My worry is that Michigan could wear them down, but I think it'll be a close game going into the fourth quarter, and then it will come down to whether or not TCU has the depth to finish, all right, and then who makes a mistake. Now, going to the Ohio State-Georgia game, I think the thing that's interesting to me about that, and I go back to how Georgia chose to play Tennessee. Georgia chose to say, okay, here's the deal. We think we're better than you. We think we're better than you up front in the front seven, and we think we're better at corner than your receivers. And Tennessee's got some wideouts now. So what did Georgia decide to do? They lined up. They got into the face of the receivers for Tennessee, and they said, we're just not going to let you have a free release down the field. We're not just going to let you run down and create space and separation. We're going to force Hendon Hooker and your passing game to have to fit the ball into tight windows. And I think Georgia will take the same approach against Ohio State. And here's the X factor in all of this. Georgia took that approach knowing Hendon Hooker was a significant run threat. That's not what C.J. Stroud is. By and large, Georgia is going to know on every snap where C.J. Stroud's going to be. Now, he's athletic enough to extend plays and create and this and that, but they don't have to worry about like quarterback counter, quarterback draw. They don't have to worry about zone read. That's not what Ohio State is on offense. So essentially, Georgia's playing 11 on 10 because they're not having to necessarily contend with the quarterback. So I think they get up and they challenge these Ohio State receivers. And they say, okay, CJ Stroud, we're going to have enough guys in the box to stop the run. Can you beat us downfield into tight windows? I think it will be a very similar game plan to the one Georgia had versus Tennessee.
Very interesting. So you like Georgia to win it all?
I do, barring some significant injury, barring, listen, I think, and Alabama is a prime example of this. And I've said this for years and years and years, and I still believe it to be true each and every year. When you're playing in a game where, let's just say, you have some significant personnel advantages. And I think in some spots, Georgia has significant personnel advantages over all of the teams in the college football playoff this year. But if you are equal or better to your opponent, it may not necessarily come down to how many things you do right. It may come down to who makes the most errors, right? So an Alabama goes on the road to Tennessee and commits 18 penalties, all right? Tennessee didn't do that on that day, all right? So you can hurt if you're TCU or Georgia, Ohio State, you need Georgia, I think, to some degree, to do some things that are uncharacteristic of their nature. And if they do that, you have to capitalize. You can't have them fumble on their own 17-yard line and then come away with a field goal. Right. You better come away with a touchdown. It's those types of plays that will start to stack on top of each other that you've got to take advantage of if you're afforded those opportunities.
Tom Luginbill from ESPN joining us. All right, let's quick hit on a number of things before we cut you loose. Hendon Hooker not in New York as a Heisman finalist. Obviously, there's been a lot of reaction here. Tennessee's had a terrible history, honestly, with a lot of close calls and snubs in the Heisman Trophy. Do you think Hendon Hooker should have been in New York as a finalist?
I do, but I also think Bijan Robinson should have been in New York as a finalist. I think pound for pound, guys accounted for 20 touchdowns, almost 1,600 yards rushing, and many times carried that Texas football team. Maybe one of the best overall players, regardless of position in college football. As much as I love and respect Stetson Bennett, and as much as I think that he has made a difference for Georgia, it's not all about the people around him. He's had to make plays, make throws, make runs, which he has done. I think you could make the argument it's a little bit similar to 1992 with Gino Torretta in Miami, where Stetson Bennett's not even the best player on his own team, let alone the best player in the country. And the award goes to the most outstanding player. And so I'm not advocating that Stetson Bennett doesn't belong in the conversation and maybe even earn an invite. I'm just a little bit surprised that more votes didn't go out to secure some more people being in New York, Hendon Hooker included.
Tom, the transfer portal has just gone berserk, as you know, in the couple of days in this window. What when you're looking at this from a recruiting standpoint, the college football analyst standpoint, I know the reasons for it, but what's your reaction to digesting this? All these players on the move that looks like NFL free agency.
Vince, how long is your show?
For you, I got all the time you need.
I mean, quite honestly, man, and I've said this before, if you had half a brain, you could have seen this coming 3 years ago.
Yep.
The moment they enacted this by putting the cart in front of the horse and initially not having transfer windows,
right?
Allowing the one-time free transfer. And here's the kicker. Here's the one that really gets me. I understand, and I like this part. I like the satisfactory progress towards a degree. If you earn your degree, you can transfer and play right away. I've always loved that rule because you've accomplished the task that you were there to accomplish, aside from being a football player or a basketball player, what have you. But if you get that, you should only get it once. Right. We shouldn't have the JT Daniels of the world and the Keaton Slowises of the world. You transferred before you earned your degree. That's your transfer. If you earn your degree, it shouldn't matter. You should have to sit. I mean, this is ridiculous. And at some point, don't we get to the point where you start to look at some of these guys and go, maybe it's the player and not the program?
Yep.
Like maybe the problem is not the program where they're at. Maybe the player isn't good enough. And that's okay. Maybe that's okay to admit that and acknowledge that. But to see what's taken place here, to see what the sheer numbers are, our numbers tell us that of the vast majority of players, and it's a little over 19,000 prospects in football since the 2019 cycle that have gone into the portal. Just 40% have actually landed somewhere. Nobody's doing the math, Vince. That's the issue, is the music's going to stop, and the vast majority of these people are going to be left without a chair. Now, I'm fully aware that, players that have been tampered with, players that know exactly what's coming their way from an NIL perspective, have had a third party or an agent or even a coach or what have you get in contact with them. Yes, those players are going to have a landing spot. If you're a quarterback that's been productive, if you're an offensive tackle, if you're a pass rusher, if you're a tall corner that's been productive, those are going to be 4 positions that are always going to have a home. Always, no matter what. But everybody else better think long and hard, and you better think about who you're listening to, because the grass isn't always greener on the other side, and the math isn't weighing into your favor. I think that's the one thing that is so glaringly obvious, but everybody just seems to ignore it. And I'll say the other thing too on this. I know I'm getting long-winded, but to sit here and have this window of 45 days, you need 45 days to figure out what your market value is, to figure out whether or not you're going to have a home. No, you don't. There are staffs that have manpower devoted to scouring the transfer portal every single minute of every day. If you go in there and somebody's interested in you, you're going to know within 48 hours, maybe 24. Right. We don't need this thing to go 45 days. What we need it to do is be done prior to signing day so that the players and the programs alike know exactly where the numbers stand so that you can actually accomplish something on National Signing Day. Mm-hmm. That's the issue. We're bleeding this over into signing day without truly knowing who's still out the door with players floating in the transfer portal, and then what scholarships you're going to have allotted to the high school ranks for National Signing Day. So we've bled this together unnecessarily, in my opinion, and we've further clouded the issue.
Well, Tom, as you know, a lot of high school athletes aren't getting the offers because teams are holding back scholarships for the transfer portal. So if you get that out of the way, then more kids get college opportunities. But we're not necessarily looking at the betterment of the kids as a whole.
You're right. And they're withholding scholarships during 2 periods.
Right.
This initial period, then all of a sudden January is going to occur.
Right.
And we're going to have more programs going, well, I didn't quite close on this guy that I thought I would, but maybe we don't allot that scholarship to the third guy on our board. Maybe we wait till the spring and see if somebody comes out of spring football unhappy and he's got 3 years of eligibility, but he's played, we'll take that guy instead. So it's essentially a double whammy.
Unbelievable. Tom Luginbill from ESPN. All right, just real quick on Tennessee's commit class right now. They've had most of it done with a bunch of commits for a while. Nico's in it. Obviously, some really good players. Just an overall thought on UT's class right now.
I think it's, one of the reasons why they've been able to hold on, why it is deep, is I think that the success on the field, all right, is what cements a recruiting class. Mm-hmm. It's very easy for something to become splintered and fractured if you go through the spring and summer months like Tennessee had and done a really nice job securing verbal commitments. And then all of a sudden you go into the fall and you lay an egg, right? So now you're hanging on by a thread and there's chum in the water and all the sharks are circling, right? So you got to ward off this program. You got to ward off this program. Again, winning cures all woes. And so they've been able to secure this deal. I still think that they probably won't use the full allotment. They know exactly where they are. They're going to know what their collective and their NIL is going to allow for them to do. And then apply that towards, maybe a transfer portal guy here, a transfer portal guy there. Because if you're looking for a quick remedy, it's likely percentages are going to tell you that more than likely it's not going to come from the high school ranks. Yeah. So if you're Tennessee and you've got this class set up the way they do, as you referenced with Nico and many, many others, and you say, okay, if we don't think that guy's going to come in and help us immediately, all right, or maybe he's a little bit more of a developmental guy, maybe there's another guy that we could bring in that's got 2 years of eligibility that can help bolster it, and that both of them can help solidify that position. And that's the magic of the transfer portal right now. I mean, that's where Lane Kiffin has worked magic. It's where Mel Tucker a year ago did a really nice job with Michigan State. Lincoln Riley did it with the offensive side of the football at SC. Now he's got a lot of work to do on the defensive side of the football. So it's really about identifying where you either lack talent or depth or both, at whatever position that may be, and addressing that singularly, not only in the first period, but all the way through January, February, March, April, and then May 1 through May 15th, you could actually see classes actually rounding out then, not in February.
All right. You got Sugar Bowl. Is that when we're going to see you?
Yep. Sugar Bowl. the 31st, Kansas State and Alabama. I'm so intrigued by this because I think we all know like what Kansas State is. Like you won't hear about opt-outs. You won't hear about guys in the transfer portal. That whole team will show up. Question is going to be, what Alabama team do we see? Are there opt-outs? Are there opt-ins? Are there guys like Will Anderson and Bryce Young that said, I'm playing, man? No, we don't know that yet. And then on top of it, are you mature enough to get past not being in the college football playoff?
Yep.
Are you mature enough to accept the privilege of playing in the Sugar Bowl and winning a Sugar Bowl championship against a ranked team? Because we've seen in the past with Alabama, they've struggled with that. They struggled with it against Oklahoma, struggled against it with Utah.
Yep.
So I think there's a lot of intrigue heading into this Sugar Bowl.
What else are you working on? Anything else you want to plug real quick?
Capital One Bowl Mania show on Sunday night. We're gonna rank all 42 bowl games, pick a winner, give our confidence level. Me, Acho, Dan Mullen, and it's really more of a show to poke fun at each other because I may say, okay, well, my confidence level is a 3 that so and so is going to win, and they're going to look at me going, a 3? That's all you think they're going to win by? Come on, man! I'm giving that team a 39. Well, why are you giving them a 39? So we just punch each other chops the whole time.
Awesome. At Tom Luginbill on Twitter. Tom, appreciate it, man. Merry Christmas too if we don't talk to you before then.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Same to you. Have a good one.
Thanks, you too. Tom Luginbill from ESPN 99.1, the Sports Animal.